Are you all ready for another tutorial? Let's do table topper number 16 from the Quilted Cow. This is a super fun, beginner-friendly pattern that you can do in just a few hours. This doesn't take very long. We're going to walk through some of the tips and tricks to make these nice little points at the end. I want you all to be prepared. There are some things that you need to be aware of when you're cutting the pieces out of your kit for this table topper. So let's look at those. I want to show you how I'm cutting up fabric A because fabric A is a little bit unique in the cuts. So you've got to have 3 different cuts out of this fabric. So you're not just cutting strips and cutting up the strips. There are a lot of ways to skin a cat, I'm not going to lie, but this is the way I think I figured out to do this one. So I need this to be 5 7/8, not 5 3/4. I need it 5 7/8. So it's that little tiny line just before the big line. So I will post something on that just to make it a little easier, but I'm going to double check. I am not using my flip around method on this one. I am using my board just because for 7/8 that's easier to me. So 1 2 3 4 5 and then 7/8. You can also cut this at 6 and then trim it back 1/8 of an inch, and a lot of people do that, or they just cut it at 6 and go on with it. Totally works however you want to do it. You probably can get away with 6 if you want on this one. But I'm going to line it up and try to do this the best that I can on 5 7/8. And I'm going to give it a little cut. I'm now going to flip it because it is 5 7/8 one way and not 5 7/8 the other way. And I'm going to lay it down. I am actually going to trim off this back end piece this time. So I am going to use my ruler in the opposite way. I'm doing that so you can see both methods here, not because I'm trying to confuse you, but it's 1 2 3 4 5 and 7/8 again, which is that little tiny line right before the 6. The other way you can do it is you can look on your ruler here, and I've gone 5 7/8 over. So I'm going to zoop it up, and I've got a 5 7/8 square. Another way you can do this is you can use that square ruler that I showed you before and cut it that way. This was just kind of easy. So the next cut I'm going to do is 3 7/8. Don't you love a 7/8? So easiest way to do it is 1 2 3, and then right before the 4 is that little tiny line that is the 7/8. I can see it through my ruler here. I'm going to zoom in really quick so you can see this. Okay, here's what I'm talking about. So here is my line, and here is the 7/8. It's that little tiny marker right there. So I'm going to cut it at 3 7/8. And I made sure this is all lined up. I made sure this is square up at the top. And to zoom, just like that. Need 3 7/8 the other way because these are blocks. Line it up. Make sure it's square on the top. I'm going to show you that real quick. Okay, so see how this is kind of lined up here at the top, and then this, my 7/8, is lined up over to the side. I'm going to nudge it just a little bit. That's what I'm talking about, squaring it up. Now you can use the top of your ruler. My ruler's kind of long, so it would hit me in the belly if I did that. Okay, we're going to do this just a little bit different because I need 8 squares. So I'm actually going to fold it down, put it here. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to come over 2 1/4 from the edge. So there's 1 and 2. Now just remember, one side of my ruler has that 1/2 inch gap. This side does not. And I want to use the side without the 1/2 inch gap because I'm doing 2 1/4. After I cut it, I double checked my size. So once you cut your 3 5/8 square, you're going to cross cut it. So cross cutting just simply means I'm going to lay my square down. I'm going to cut it once this direction. So from point to point. And then you're going to cut it again from point to point. And if you get off, it's okay. We'll figure it out later. We're going to cut it again, point to point. We'll make it work. So I've got 4 triangles from that 1 square. That was the goal. Okay, so probably the most difficult thing on this whole table topper is taking these end triangles. So they kind of cap the ends, but then you're taking another piece of fabric over the top of it. So it's just like when you snowball a corner. If you don't know what that means, if you've ever seen a square and it looks like they've got little pieces of fabrics on all four corners and it almost makes it look like a circle, that's called a snowball. So what we're going to do in this one is I'm going to take this white piece of fabric and I'm actually going to mark from corner to corner. Now I'm using a heat erasable pen, and that's real important, especially when you're using white fabric like this. But I'm going to use this heat erasable pen and I'm going to come across right on the corners like that. So then I'm going to take this, I'm going to lay it into this triangle to where it matches up right on the corner, just like that. And I'm actually going to grab a pin and I'm going to pin it because I need it to stay in place. Now I'm going to sew it, make sure when I sew it that this stays in the point. And then I'm going to cut it off and you're going to have a new looking corner. So let's do that next. Okay, so all I'm doing is making sure that my point is super lined up in the middle. Then I'm going to drop my foot. Now I do have my 1/4 inch seam foot. You may want to change your feet out when you're doing this yourself. And we're just going to stitch straight across that line. Okay, once we get it on, we're going to trim off a 1/4 inch seam. That means I'm going to use my ruler and I'm going to lay the 1/4 inch. So I'm using this square just because that's what I have handy, but I'm just going to come in a 1/4 inch. I'm going to lay that 1/4 inch on the drawn line like this. Make sure it's all lined up. Then I'm going to cut it. Don't throw these away. These are valuable scraps. But when you open it up, you've got a whole new top on that triangle. And I'm just going to iron it real good and it's going to be fantastic. Super easy, right? You can totally do that. Okay, so like all of these table toppers, you're going to sew them together in rows. So this becomes a row, like right here. This becomes a row right here. And this will be an easy row because it's just little blocks. This becomes a row. So break it down. Now you can do it the opposite direction. These are going to go on last. We're going to put our caps on last. So think of it like you're getting ready to go outside. I'm going to put my cap on last right before I leave. So we're going to sew all these together. Something to look at. You have some that are cut like little triangles. You're going to sew with the little point in the corner. So you're going to square it up this way. So the point is in the corner. We'll trim things up. Don't worry about that at this point. But just put it in that corner. Make sure you're not stretching because these are triangles, so they're cut against the grain or at an angle against the grain, so they'll become stretchy. This is called cut on the bias. So when you pull on it, it becomes stretchy. See that? It kind of stretches. So you don't want to stretch it out. You want to put it all together. We're going to make it all work. It's going to be amazing. You're going to love this pattern. Okay, once you get all your rows sewed together, I didn't press my seams open this time. I just didn't feel like it. But what I want you to do is just trim a little bit because you can kind of see there's a tail. So you're just going to take your smallest ruler. For me right now, this is this big giant square ruler because I don't know where my ruler is. And you're just going to trim that little wing off a little bit so that you don't have it in the way. Okay, there's a lot of seams to match up for this one. So I'm going to bring in the little chicken. I always feel bad about the little chicken. It's like, I feel like I'm attacking it, but I do love the little chicken. So a lot of seams to match up. That means when I lay them together like this, I'm going to make sure that my little seams all match up together. So, and I'm going to nest them. We've been talking a lot about nesting our seams on my channel. I think this is a channel. So you're just going to put them together like this. See how one is going one way and one is going the other way? And then we're going to put a pin right in that little seam because we want that to hold together and we want those to look good. Now I'm going to make sure all of these line up and pin all of them. Just so you can see, I've got a pin in every single one of those. Then when I feed it in, notice how I've got that little guy hanging off the end. It's okay. I'm going to feed him in because the seams are the most important piece of this, not the edge. That's a big thing to remember when you're sewing stuff together that has kind of these little points and things like that. My seams are what I care about. The points aren't necessarily the thing. We'll trim those up and it'll look fine, but I want to make sure those seams stay together. Okay, they're not perfect, but they look pretty good. And when I iron it, they'll look even better. And when it gets quilted, you'll never even know that they were just a hair off. Okay, so I got the majority of the top together. I just need to add on my little corner pieces here. I want to show you this on the back. I didn't iron open all my seams. I ironed open the main big seams to help it lay flatter. It's not going to lay super flat because I didn't iron open my seams, but it's okay. I'm going to sew on these little corners here. Let me show you a little video of this because this part can get tricky. I'm going to find the center point here, and I'm going to match it up in the middle so that I have it as even as possible. I'm going to throw a pin in here. Now look, see how over the edges, see how that kind of hangs out over the edges? We're going to trim that off, and that might hurt your inner triangle trimming self, but we're going to trim it off just a little bit once we get this all together. My goal is that these are kind of in the middle of this one. So there's a little bit of symmetry there. Oh, I thought I lost one. Runaway triangle. Okay, so when you get done, look at all those edges. We're just going to trim those off so it'll make it have really nice sharp ends. Love this. Okay, so you know I had all those little wings that I was showing you. I've ironed this out a little bit more. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to line it up and make sure I've got it squared up as much as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect, especially if it's me. I'm going to push it out as far as I can go with this. You can see where I'm off when I cut it off, but look how perfect it looks when I cut it like that. It doesn't look like I was off at all, which is a great thing about a generous pattern that makes me look better than I actually am. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and I hope you had fun sewing it. You can make these too. Patterns and kits are available from my friends at the Quilted Cow. Please let me know what you think in the comments.